Hey guys, welcome back to Tennis 360, the podcast where we talk about all things tennis. My name's Anthony Hirsch.
I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
Welcome back to the podcast. So we just had our Rome tournament where Sasha Zverev defeated Nicolas Jarry in the final, and on the WTA side, Iga Swiatek defeated Aryna Sabalenka in the final in straight sets. Right off the back of Madrid, where they had a classic final. This one was not as close. But starting from the ATP side first, and then getting to that final right after. Sasha Zverev gets it done. It's a bit of a little bit of a depleted field, I felt like, in Rome with Sinner and Alcaraz gone, but Zverev made the most of his draw. He gets through it with a crazy serving performance on the day with 95% of first serve points won. Made about 80% of his first serves in. Just didn't let Jarry have any kind of chance on the serve and being able to start playing his super aggressive game and stepping into the court whatsoever. I felt like Jarry didn't serve as well as usual either, doing much worse on second serve than usual for what he did in the tournament. Like, for example, against Steph, just to throw a couple of stats, against Steph, he won 60% of second serve points. Against Paul, he won 64%. Here, he went 8 for 23 on second serve points. So his serve was not there. And it looked close in the scoreline, 6-4, 7-5. But from my perspective, it wasn't that close. The biggest examples of that and showing that that's the case, 58% total points won for Zverev, which shows that it was very close on the Jarry service games, not so close on Zverev service games, who played a really good final. So what did you think of it?
Yeah, I was sort of interested in the matchup going into this match, but when I was watching the semifinal matches, after Zverev wrestled the second set off of Tabilo after really a poor performance in that first set, I thought, he looks like he's in a mood to win the title and he will fancy himself now. I think he took a lot of confidence from figuring out his poor start to his semifinal and being in, kind of the person that is the highest ranked and expected to win the tournament just based on the seeding. And we know that Zverev can get nervous. So I was sort of curious whether he would be able to hold his nerve on that point. And I think he played a pretty flawless final. As you say, the serving performance was pretty unreal. I think it was like 90% of points behind the first serve won. I think he's what's interesting about his serve is that because he's nervous in the past from double faulting, I don't feel like he's a type of server like Hurkacz, where he's really trying to go 100% on his serve and try to get a lot of like free points from it. I think that he is willing to get into a baseline rally. So his first serve is just so consistent, and he's got the highest percentage first serve on the tour because of that reason. He's not afraid to play behind it. He uses it very strategically to set himself up to play a good point from the baseline. And I think he's in such a good rhythm with that it's just difficult for the returner to make deep cuts into his service games unless he really has a poor serving day, especially because he is so solid from the baseline, especially with the backhand. I thought that it could be an interesting match if Jarry would be able to hold his nerve. And as you say, if he was able to have had a good serving day, which he just didn't have on the day. And that kind of made the match a little bit, it lacked some kick to it. As you say, it didn't feel like it was that close when you were watching it. Sort of the closest it got was at 4-all in the second set, where Jarry was up 30-15 or 30-all, and he put a forehand kind of mid-court ball into the net.
Yeah, 30-all, yeah.
Yeah, so I felt like he, as you said, there just wasn't many opportunities for him, but he also didn't help himself. I mean, the nerves were very evident. He almost handed the match to Zverev on a silver platter with 2 double faults, then had to play a point behind his second serve. Was it at 4-5, somewhere in that second set?
Yeah, 4-4, I think, 4-4.
Yeah, and so he looked riddled with nerves. And in the end, I think that probably came in the way of him actually having a good performance because, they have a similar build, but quite a different game in that Jarry is generally a much more offensive player and will look to hit through you. And it's very hard to do that with Zverev. who's, you know, one of the best power absorbers in the game. And so, yeah, I think this will give a big boost of confidence to Zverev, who, you know, always fancies himself as a contender. But as you say, I do think Rome has come at a challenging time this year with such a long clay court season. We've had 3 Masters tournaments. We've had a 500 packed in the last 6 weeks. And I think a lot of the people started losing gas by Madrid, and we also had withdrawals. So I just think the whole player field feels pretty tired, pretty depleted. And then there's the crop of guys who are looking for a little bit more playing this week, who are going and playing in Geneva, you know, Djokovic being one of them because of the early loss, very strange loss in Rome. So a very bizarre kind of last couple of weeks, especially between Madrid and Rome.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of Zverev versus Jarry, I agree with all the points that you're saying in regards to the match. I felt like there are a few things that Jarry probably could have done to get a little bit of momentum better, such as probably coming to the net more. I feel like he's quite good at coming to the net. He wasn't able to do that. Zverev himself, I feel like, is hitting volleys as well as I've seen him in his career.
Yeah.
And that was doing really well for him in the last few weeks and last few months. But Jarry probably could have done that to be a little bit more aggressive himself. And Zverev, I feel like he's not going to be a Hurkacz who just goes for a lot of aces and flat out just like service weak. He'll just make sure he hits with a lot of speed and kind of gets it kind of going in the court, and just to start off the points off really well and really strong. And it just felt like Zverev was always in control of the match. I mean, Jarry has made it close in the past. In fact, he won their first meeting that they played, but it just felt like Jarry's serve needed to be there on his own games, and it felt like it got a little bit worse in this match, and he just had no leeway in this Zverev serve, because not only is Zverev first serve percentage so good, that's a really key stat for him. I feel like the second serve percentage is quite poor sometimes for Zverev, because he basically goes for 2 big first serves, only at 1 double fault throughout the match, and very few second serve points. So I just felt like it was a pretty simple match in that respect, and Zverev won the serve to return dynamic. In regards to this clay season, I don't know what this means for Zverev going to Roland Garros. He had a great chance at the Australian Open, and I feel like honestly it was the mental side that got the best of him against Medvedev, and I think that we've seen that before. We'll see if he can get over the hump if the field continues to be depleted, and we'll see how Djokovic looks at Geneva, because I still think we have to look at Djokovic as one of the absolute top contenders, and he is the defending champ. So we're going to see what all happens with that. But
yeah, well said. I think we'll talk about it more in the power rankings, of course, but I think players looking, for more playing time, sharpen things up. But then there's also others in the mix who've played plenty of tournaments. Taylor Fritz, I mean, he's had a decent clay court season. The guy just loves to play tennis in tournaments, doesn't want to practice. So it's an interesting, Casper Ruud's also playing in Geneva, as if he hasn't played enough clay court tennis this year. So it's been interesting. But, a win is a win. He got it done, and it's not like he hasn't been playing all the tournaments himself. So I'm sure he's feeling a little bit tiredness in the legs, and will want to recoup ahead of next week.
Yeah, for sure. I guess Fritz gets a little bit of a pass because he's done well this week. He's reached the quarterfinals of where was I think Madrid and also in Rome, and he reached the semis of Monte Carlo last year. So he's the first American to get to the quarterfinals at all 3 of these events, which is a great result for him. And also just a shout out as well to Tommy Paul, had a good run to the semifinals. He's got the good athleticism and kind of defense and speed that does really well. And he got it done. He before this event, he was 39% win rate on clay, even though he was a Roland Garros junior champ, like we must have mentioned last week as well. But it's a good run for him. He played really well, really well against Medvedev as well in the quarterfinals, who's the, I believe, round of 16 or quarterfinals. But he got done against Medvedev, and those are some good runs I want to give shout out to. Also, shout out to Chile, who, they had a great tournament. First time that 2 Chileans were in the semifinals, first time ever in a Masters 1000. They hadn't been not one had been in the Masters 1000 semifinal in a long time. I don't have the exact stat on me, but it was like over a decade. And now they had two in the semis with Tabilo and also with Jarry. So I love seeing that. The atmospheres with the South American fans cheering them on was amazing. I love what they bring to the sport. It's South American crowds, and it's great to see this kind of success. And I'm still pushing for an 1,000 tournament in South America because their fans are built different.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, I would love to see that happen. And this was a great run. Tabilo played great. He's a lefty guy. We've seen that be dangerous and annoying on clay courts in the last 20 years. But he's got a big serve. He's got a big forehand. He played really well throughout the week. Just not enough against Zverev, who in that match in the semis where Zverev just a little bit better in the tight moments, a little bit more experienced, and pulled out a second set tiebreaker. And Jarry played absolutely phenomenal. In the quarterfinals against Steph. Steph probably could have done better to finish out on some key moments. It was like love 40 at, was it 5-5 or 4-4, 4-5? There's a love 40 moment where Jarry saved 3 consecutive break points. And there's a point where Tsitsipas went like 1 for 12 on break points converted. But part of that was for Jarry, which is so mentally tough and looked so zoned in. And what a tournament for him to reach a career high of number 16 in the world and to have the run that he's gone on, because he's a pretty complete player. He's 6'7", but he moves decently well. And when he's locked in, he's consistent. He loves the dirt. Had never even been, I believe, to the 4th round of a 1,000 tournament before this week. Got it done in the final. Great match against Tommy Paul as well, where they both played really fun tennis, flashy tennis, with a really great last game as well. So it ended up being an interesting tournament for the players who did get to the ends of the event. But it's very hard to beat a player who's serving 130 miles per hour bombs and making 80% of them in, and even doing really well in the second serve as well. So just very little leeway for Jarry to work with, but still a great tournament from him.
Yeah,
so I mentioned that as well. And then moving into the WTA side. So talking about the WTA, Iga Swiatek with her fourth Masters this season wins 6-2, 6-3 in emphatic fashion over Aryna Sabalenka. Swiatek, absolutely one of the best athletes I think we've ever seen in the women's game. I'll just say that for my opinion. 22 years old, moves like nobody's business. Her footwork is phenomenal. The little step she takes to get back into the middle of the court after being pushed out to the side, the explosive steps she takes to get to the side of the court, when she's returning in the tram lines, just the way she moves around the court flawlessly, just left very little for Sabalenka to work with in the final. And Sabalenka, her forehand at times in this tournament felt a little bit off. This isn't the conditions where she's the most comfortable. I felt like that was the case at the start of this match. And when they did get into a rally, Sabalenka's shot is not as piercing against Iga Swiatek because the court isn't as quick. Swiatek has so much time to defend from way back behind the court. And it just felt like whenever they'd go into a forehand rally, maybe Sabalenka could have taken a few more chances, either hit a drop shot or, try to go for a down the line and hit to the backhand of Swiatek a little bit more when they get caught in the forehand. But I just tell you what, Swiatek her serve speed was up. I think her average for the tournament was like 105. Her average in this match was like 113 or something like that. Like her speed of shot was just so far up. And when they got into rallies, it was very hard for Sabalenka to find ways to dictate, which is what she needs to do to be winning. And Swiatek now 8-3 in the head-to-head. And is there a question of who's the best women's player in the world? In my opinion, no. Sabalenka won the last major, and she's been very good and very consistent in majors. But when I look at the grand scheme of things, especially that semifinal of the WTA final screaming out to me with that momentous performance that she did, where she was playing very complete and very good in that semifinal match, where she just looked fully in control against Sabalenka. I'm just like, is there a question? That was on hard courts, it wasn't on clay. So I just think, to me, Swiatek is unequivocally the best player in the world, which isn't controversial, but I just feel like it's important to mention how far, or that she's so clearly far ahead of the field she's clearly ahead of the field, in my opinion, is what I would say. And she now has the second highest number of WTA points ever, I think, behind Serena, is what I saw, with over 11,000. So Swiatek's playing absolutely fantastic, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was another good women's tournament, and it was a shame we didn't have Rybakina in the mix, because otherwise we may have been able to have all 4 of our top seeds in the semifinals. Semifinals. Coco Gauff had another good run, making it to the semis, but she also doesn't have the answers against Iga Swiatek on clay. I think clay is quite clearly her most dominant surface, and she. I'm not sure, as we were kind of talking about earlier, what more players could try and do to defeat her on clay. She's got such a complete game. She's, even though her technique for her serve is a little different, is often critiqued, she makes that work for her, and she wins the most points behind her serve, probably thanks to her movement and her understanding of the court and angles. And she's just so hard to get the ball past. There were many moments in that match where you kind of thought, geez, against anybody else, that would have been a winner. I do think, I'm not making excuses, but I do think Sabalenka had a slow start, maybe because she's feeling a little sore, a little pain in her back. Just, she didn't really talk about it, but she's also, not really one to talk about those types of things, and has never retired from a professional match. I'm not sure she was feeling 100%. She didn't start that match with quite the same intensity that she did in Madrid. And I think she could have, perhaps tried a few things strategically differently. But at the end of the day, as you kind of said, Swiatek has put some distance between herself and the rest of the field, especially on the clay. And she showed that this season, and she'll have the chance to show that even more at Roland Garros. And I think she, most certainly will be the overwhelming favorite to do so. And I think she's less susceptible to these kind of shock wins from, young guns having a hot night against her on clay, as she might be susceptible to it on hard courts when, as you say, there's, less time, and sometimes there really is nothing you can do when the ball's too fast. But yeah, the clay is most certainly her surface, and she's already got 3 titles at Roland Garros, and she's barely 22. So it's kind of scary to think what she might be able to do, and it's also exciting. So as close as we kind of think it is on the women's tour right now, with the top 4 players, as you say, she's putting distance between herself. She also probably knows that this is her best chance of winning a major this season. The last few years for the women's tour at Wimbledon has been, here, there, and everywhere, and her experiences on grass is limited. And she often plays quite a short grass court season as well. So I think she recognizes that this is her best chance. The US Open is also challenging, with a number of players feeling more comfortable on the hard court. So really exciting to see somebody also get the double done, the dirt double. Her and Serena Williams and Darian Safina have done that on the WTA Tour. So quite an elite list of women there. And other than that, for the women's tournament, another dominant run from Collins to get to the semifinals. I mean, my goodness, she's having a stellar part of her season, and is certainly going to cause some trouble at Roland Garros, in my opinion, and raise some alarm bells for people who are on her side of the draw. And Coco Gauff will also be feeling good. Semi-final run, she needed a good performance going into Roland Garros. She made the semis for singles and then also the finals in doubles. Nice to see her back playing some doubles as well. So should be, slightly more positive than maybe she was a couple of weeks ago. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Coco, she went through a little bit of a rough patch, I think, just slightly rougher for her. So it's good to see that. I mean, against Swiatek, she just has a tough time of it in terms of the head-to-head matchup. It was so exciting to see Gauff finding a way through in Cincinnati, like you say. Hopefully on hard courts or on grass courts, we can see that figured out. And to see another top player figuring it out and being able to get the win, because it's good to see a lot of players at the top. But it does feel to me like a bit of a very different situation on the ATP and the WTA if we were to compare. I don't know if there's much reason to compare, but if there is, where on the ATP it feels very chaotic and up to the open, and Swiatek just feels like such a massive favorite at Roland Garros. If they are to play again, I guess the question is, does Sabalenka have a chance to beat Swiatek on clay, and what does she have to do to beat her? Definitely, she needs to introduce variety. I felt like the problem in this match and the conditions in Roland Garros aren't entirely dissimilar from how they are in Rome. So what she needs to do is not necessarily do what she was doing in this match, and not be going for early ball kind of huge shots right out the gate. And I do agree she was tired. I think part of that might be the back problem that she suffered or started to suffer against Svitolina. The other thing I think is that she played 5 of her 6 matches in Madrid in 3 sets, including long matches against Robin Montgomery, long matches against a few players there, like the epic against Swiatek as well. So she's been having tough matches. It's not like this tournament was completely dissimilar to lost the first set of the tournament to Katie Volynets. Anyway, what I feel like that was a problem for Sabalenka, but also I feel like the problem for Sabalenka was just going for early ball shots. She needs to feel better about building out the points and feel better about doing that consistently. And yeah, I feel like she was a little bit off her game for the most part. I felt like Swiatek played absolutely brilliant to not let her in. I also would mention that Sabalenka had 7 breakpoint chances in the first 2 games of games of the second set. So it's about Sabalenka taking her chances and trying to build out the points. And Swiatek will use her defense, but trying to build out the points, use variety, and then hopefully try to find ways to hit winners. And she'll have to have an absolutely marvelous service day, because her serve is much more neutralized. Swiatek is such an elite returner, especially on clay where she has so much time. So all of those things I think are true. Do you have anything to add for what you think maybe Sabalenka would need to do to beat Swiatek? I guess probably before we move out onto the power rankings as well.
No, not much more to add. Maybe recognizing the body serve a little bit. I thought Swiatek used that very strategically against Sabalenka, and she just didn't really create a different view for the server. I thought she could kind of try to disrupt Swiatek's view of the body serve by standing in slightly different returning positions and sort of being willing to challenge Swiatek to hit multiple targets. So I thought that was one thing she could have done to try to kind of throw off the Swiatek rhythm on her serve, because she was in a bit of a groove, and as a returner sometimes subtle things like that, by changing the visual for the server, can throw them off. But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's Swiatek's surface, and it's going to take near perfect tennis to beat her. And, Sabalenka said her movement is just so good. It forces me to go for shots I wouldn't take against other people, because she's moving around so well and retrieving so much. So I think you have to have one of those days where everything is just in rather than just out. And you also have to hope that Swiatek gets a little nervous, feels a little bit of the pressure, or has an off day herself. So yeah, I think it's going to be a monumental challenge for someone to overcome Swiatek. And, Sabalenka, I think, has done a really good job this clay court season of staying within touching distance. She's not, necessarily been blown out of the water, but she's not quite had it, and that's the difference. So ultimately, I do think it's Swiatek's to lose.
All right, and then moving on to the weekly power rankings on the ATP side for my picks. I've got Tsitsipas moving into the number 1 spot. Sinner and Alcaraz both did not play Rome. Zverev, of course, won the tournament. It was not Steph. In fact, like I mentioned, Steph did have some chances against Jarry. He probably would have wanted to pull that out. But I'm just thinking about the clay court swing as a whole and who I'm feeling confident about in terms of their matches that they played throughout this clay court swing, taking in the context of the whole swing. I feel like Tsitsipas, even against Jarry, didn't play badly at all. I feel like he's only played fantastic tennis for the most part. Against Thiago Monteiro in Madrid, he probably could have wanted to play slightly better, but anyway, he's been playing fantastic, and he just loves the clay court. It makes everything in his game work a little bit better. The backhand, it's such a difficult height to work with. Similar things for the serve, which it doesn't hurt the serve at all. And he just moves so well on the surface, and it's kind of crazy to see how good of an athlete he is and is able to control the court so well. And he just I don't know. It surprises me that he does. It surprises me he doesn't like grass more too, because I don't know. He's got a lot of tools that could work well on natural surface, but either way, on clay he's fantastic, and he does have time on the back end, which helps him a lot. Moving down, Sinner and Alcaraz did not play this week, but they're still two of the best. I do hope that both are healthy for Roland Garros, because Eliza, I think you'd agree, if they're both in, then they're gonna make the tournament so much better. So hopefully they're both healthy as well. Then I've got Zverev at number 4, won the tournament. And he's playing fantastic. He's serving out of his mind. So we'll see how he does at Roland Garros. He, I wouldn't say he got close to winning the title a couple of years ago, but he did play a great match against Rafa, playing the best tennis of his career, at least up until that point. So I do question his mental game and his fortitude in the best of 5 format, because he's done way better in the best of 3 format than the best of 5. So those are a few things I would question with him. Also, when he plays against like top 5, top 10 guys in big matches, in quarterfinals and semifinals, he can struggle. So we'll see what happens with him. But anyway, that being said, he won Rome, and so deserves spot number 4. Rublev is at the 5th spot because he did not have as good of a week. He also went to the hospital after winning Madrid, and he seems to be mostly okay, but I don't know if he was 100%. There were problems all across the board. And then I have Fritz at number 6, very consistent. Fritz is going under the radar, in my opinion. Taylor is playing great, and he's been very good on clay. I think he's underrated on clay. I really do. I was saying this at the start of the clay swing as well. He's made big strides in his defense on clay. Looking great, and he has so much time to power off on the forehand and the backhand, which helps. I mean, I think he's good on grass, but he doesn't have the time on the backhand. He's somebody to watch on clay. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a bit of a run out at the French. And then I've got Ruud at number 7, who's not been doing as well the last couple of weeks. Strange loss to Kecmanovic. Medvedev at number 8. He wasn't able to defend, but not a horrible week from him, but not able to defend his title. Then I've got Jarry coming in. Already spoke about him, but he had a great week. And Alejandro Tabilo, who is a great player as well. So those round out my ATP top 10.
Wow, Djokovic is out.
Yeah, Joker's been true. Joker's been out for a few weeks. Listen, he might.
Is gonna get you.
They might. they are. I already see them in the comments. But I will say, if he does well in Geneva, I'll give him a spot back in. I'm not doubting him for the French. Let's just see, because the results haven't been there, but I still think he's the top dog when he's playing at his best. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, most of this for me has the French in mind. I've gone rogue, but the rogueness semi depends on news about whether Alcaraz and Sinner are playing. And right now I'm feeling more pessimistic than I am positive about their health situation. I'm feeling pretty negative about Sinner's chances of playing. And Alcaraz, I think, has more chance of playing, but it doesn't look like he's been practicing at 100% with the forehand. And I'm not convinced the forehand will be at 100%. So I have them much lower than I would like to have them in my power rankings. And it made my life difficult for figuring out who deserved to be top of this list. So much of this, again, was similar to you. That was reflective. Sorry, go ahead.
It makes sense too, but I mean, they've had slightly positive signs the last few days, but they've been injuries that have been hindering them throughout the end of the clay court swing. So it just it makes they haven't been regular injuries, and I mean the right arm injury, like you said, it makes Alcaraz's best shot in his game just kind of questionable. So I absolutely get that as well.
Yeah. So we'll see, as you said, as news kind of develops over this next week. And that might influence some change next Monday when we record the pod. But as of now, I wouldn't even be surprised if we'd be without Jannik Sinner. So as I said, it made my life difficult for picking the top guys, and a lot of this reflected who's performed well this clay court season. I think Tsitsipas has been reliably there at each of these tournaments, other than in Madrid.
Yes, in Madrid, yep.
Where I think he was tired after Monte Carlo and Barcelona.
Yeah.
And I think the tiredness caught up with Ruud in Rome with that odd performance against Sesmanovic, and also, he did all right in Madrid, but not as far as he would have wanted to. So I think the two of them had a stellar start and ran out of gas, but I'm still interested in them as contenders. And for me, Tsitsipas, having reached the final of Roland Garros before and been in multiple Grand Slam finals, I think that he is the pick of the rest of them to win it. So that's why he's in my number one spot. Zverev, I think he will really fancy himself for this title. I think the comparison is interesting to Australia. I think a lot of people picked him as a serious contender for Australia, and he just couldn't get it mentally against Medvedev over the line there. I wonder if he has a 5% swing in terms of mental edge on clay, and in particular at Roland Garros, where he's really felt this intrinsic feeling of being, a real contender here before, and seems to feel pretty confident at Roland Garros, more so than other tournaments. I do question him mentally in terms of the nerves and holding that resolve. But I think if the field is without Alcaraz and Sinner, then I really do think he has a very strong chance of winning. Rublev is in my third spot. I do think he was very sick in Madrid, but to get the title done under those conditions was really quite incredible. And as long as he's back to health, I mean, he's a reliable quarterfinalist at Grand Slams. And if he can just get over that hurdle, one tends to think like that might be the way in for him to really, start knocking on the door of a title here. So I think he's deserving of the third spot. Alcaraz is in the fourth spot because if he's playing even with a sore arm, I think he could be dangerous. Casper Ruud's right behind him. Obviously Ruud's made the final here twice as well. I do think clay's his best surface. He's been playing well on the clay. He's playing another tournament in Geneva. I do think he'll be ready for this tournament. Sinner is in the sixth spot, but as I said, I'm not sure about how optimistic I am that he's going to play. And even if he does play, I don't think he's going to take any risks. So I think if he feels any sort of pain at all, I do think he will withdraw. I'm not convinced he will be able to play that many 5-set matches back to back.
Yeah, for sure. I would also mention that doctors warned him that the hip injury might become chronic, which would mean that affects him potentially for his whole career. So he's the guy who's always very cautious about what he does with all of his moves. So I would I would say, especially with Sinner, in my opinion, I'm no doctor expert, but with Sinner, I would say I'm very cautious about his chances of playing. Yeah,
and with such a busy season coming up,
for sure,
it wouldn't be worth the risk. Djokovic, I just think, Grand Slam champion, the person that he is, the GOAT. I would never count him out of making it to a quarters and a semis. I'm not sure about his chances of winning. As you say, a little bit dependent on Geneva. He could sneak up a couple of spots, but I don't know. It's something, his mental resolve isn't quite there. The energy's not there. The team isn't quite set up yet. I'm just not feeling super confident about that, which, could be ridiculous. And he comes in and wins it all as normal service is resumed. But current results don't predict that. So,
no.
Yeah, Medvedev is right behind him. Obviously, Medvedev has really not had that great results at Roland Garros before, with just the one Masters title on clay. And he's been fine, but he's not been stellar. And I think the lack of dominance that we've seen on his serve in general, slightly diminishes his chances here as well, because he can't quite dig himself out of trouble in ways that he can on hard courts. Jarry, I think you said everything about him very well, so I won't add too much more to that other than, he's great on the clay. He's going to have great support there, and I think he'll cause some problems in the early rounds for sure. 10th spot was a little tricky. I put Dimitrov in there because he has been having such good runs at the slams the past couple of times we've played them. He's not had a stellar clay court season, but I'm still feeling like he will be able to knuckle down and get some results. But I was definitely playing around with Fritz, with Paul, with Runa as all, random ones to kind of throw into that 10th spot. But Dimitrov has been a steady Eddie for so many years. I put him in number 10.
Yeah, fair enough. Medvedev, I feel like has slowed down. I think there's something about getting to so many finals and not being able to pull through that probably mentally kind of makes it tough with the results. And in terms of Djokovic, I think he's still got to be one of the top favorites coming in consideration. So we'll see. We'll see how he does. But the results recently have not been there as much. All right, and then going into my WTA picks for the power rankings, I've got Swiatek at number 1. She's just been absolutely fantastic, stellar. I don't know what's more impressive, a 6-2, 6-3 victory where she's playing lights out, didn't drop a set, 22 years old, 21 titles, generational stuff. The next all-time great, very likely, and already maybe all-time level, at least one of the players that she's won the most majors of any real active player who's really active on the tour. Venus is technically not retired, but with 4 majors, it's crazy what she's doing at this age to have every shot in the book. And like I said, her footwork and the way she moves around the court, her athleticism and the way she can kind of move her body almost like it's just it's almost like it's elastic. It's just absolutely phenomenal. The way she turns defense to offense, and especially on the return of serve as well. Stellar stuff, all been said before, but yeah, she's just incredible. So she's number 1. Sabalenka at number 2. Still a great clay season for Sabalenka. Get to the final of Rome, especially after a long Madrid tournament and the loss that she had in the final there. I think she'd be quite happy with it, but obviously not the results she wants. She's a player of high standards, was world number 1 for 8 weeks last year. So listen, I mean, we know there's nothing that Sabalenka at this point could really do that I think should very much surprise anybody because she's that standard of player. So yes, she should be happy with this clay court swing, but any Sabalenka and any Sabalenka fan, I think, would say, okay, but we want her to win titles. So let's see what she can do to stop Swiatek, and let's see how she does at Roland Garros, because actually she did really well at Roland Garros last year, and she's made 6 consecutive Grand Slam semis. It's actually Iga who I think has struggled more at slams. And outside of the French. And Swiatek does have that 2022 U.S. Open victory, but Sabalenka has been more consistent at majors. So we'll see if Swiatek can step up to the plate in that regard. But yeah, I think these two have marked themselves as best players in the world. But I'd also mention Rybakina, who's just not been particularly healthy. She's at number 4 spot, but I did skip right over Danielle Collins, who I put at number 3. Playing phenomenal. Before she played Sabalenka, she had won 20 of 21 matches, just huge winners from all over the court. She obviously doesn't mind a clay court as well. I believe she grew up playing around Florida, which has tons of clay as well. So I think that doesn't hurt her game that much. And she's had success on clay before. So that's what I think about Collins. Gauff, absolutely fantastic. I like her game on clay. The improvements that she made on her game made it really, really hurtful on hard courts last year, but I would just not discount her on hard court or on clay court or on grass court. Because on clay court, she's just so fast, so good on defense. And I just think that I don't see why that isn't going to be able to translate to clay very, very well, especially because on defense, I still feel like she has a very good, heavier weight of shot. She still needs to improve on the forehand, especially when she's kind of defending out the forehand corner as well, in my opinion. But she's doing great, and I would watch out for her on clay. Also, her serve doesn't do as much damage on clay. But all of that said, she's a lot of her strengths play to clay, so I would say that. Then for the rest of my kind of power rankings there, I've got Jabeur and Kostyuk in there as well. Kostyk's been a very consistent player in the top 10. Got Mira Andreeva in there, who I'd watch out for as well. I've got Madison Keys. I've also got Beatrice Haddad Maia. Key's having a fantastic last couple of weeks, and then Haddad Maia, one of the better fighters and one of the more consistent clay quarters. So that's what I have for my WTA top 10. Who do you have for yours?
Yeah, very similar top half. Not much to add there. I have Rybakina and Collins flipped just based on Rybakina's experience at slams, but needs her health in order, and very interested to see if she really was ill or if she just kind of takes issue with the schedule and needs breaks, which fair enough either way. Gauff in my 5th spot as well. I agree with you. I think her movement is fantastic. She's obviously made the final of Roland Garros before. I do think she lacks the weapons to beat Swiatek, but can pretty much beat anybody else. So I think she certainly, has a good chance to make it to a final, depending on her draw and depending on whether Rybakina plays or not. Svitolina is in my 6th spot. She had a good run here, I think, to the quarters last year, a bit of a fairy tale run in her first Grand Slam back after being a mother. I think that she's, plays fantastic tennis on the clay, and she really came into the year actually pretty hot as well, and then picked up that back injury at the Australian Open, giving up basically, kind of a very favorable route to the final for her at the Australian Open with that back injury. And she's been struggling a little bit with it, but I do think we've seen some good performances from her on the clay. I think the French crowd love her, especially because of her husband. And I think that she will feel energized, and we know that she's a fighter, really good at sticking in situations where matches can get tough. So I fancy her to be in the mix in the second week. Ostapenko, obviously a previous winner, champion here at Roland Garros. It's been 6-7 years now, maybe even a little longer, but I still think that when you've won a tournament, you feel a different level of confidence when you're playing there. And on top of that, Ostapenko's just been having a really strong year, and has worked her way back inside the top 10 for a first time in quite some time. And I think that she, had a good run in Rome. She made the quarterfinals or semifinals. Geez, guys, the weeks are all bleeding together.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. All
quarterfinals, yeah. But no, I think she could, depending on the draw, cause some problems. Kostyuk is in my 8th spot. Last 2 tournaments hasn't really been the best, but, has otherwise been very consistent this season and made some good runs. I think she will play well in France. Azarenka, again, another steady Eddie, a veteran on the tour, somebody who just kind of knows how to get Grand Slams done, had another good week in Rome. I mean, she's just there and thereabouts, and she's just not above that kind of quarterfinal, semifinal level yet, but easily gets into 4th rounds, rounds of 16 at times. So I fancy her to be in the mix as well. And she took the spot over Jabeur for me, who just has been way too inconsistent this year. And I just am so questionable about her health, her ability to win matches back to back. I love Jabeur. I want her to be in this list, but I can't justify it with the current results. And then lastly, Andreeva is in my 10th spot because I think that she, has had a breakout run at the French Open before, has done well this clay court swing, had a couple of good runs, a good run in Madrid. And I think that, she's so young and so fearless and really doesn't have too much to lose that it just begs the question of these slightly older players who have more on the line to take it to her. And she's difficult to beat on this surface. And we saw she was difficult to beat in Australia as well. So, again, is somebody that I would keep an eye out for having a good little run.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, she stayed in mine as well. And then shall we move on to the Roland Garros preview, where Roland Garros is not next week. Everybody, we can relax and take a second to breathe with all the tennis that has been played. But in the week after, this coming Sunday, it's going to be starting up, and then after that we go to pretty much a few weeks later we go to Wimbledon. Then after that we have the Olympics. So we're going to have nonstop tennis. Everybody, I recommend take this week to breathe in a little bit, take some rest after a lot of tennis because we have a lot coming up as well. But we do have Roland Garros coming up along the way. And just to preview the event a little bit, on the ATP, some of the wild cards, we've got Atmain, we've got Richard Gasquet, we've got Hugh Herbert, we've got Mayotte, we've got Moreno de Albareno, we've got Impechi Pericard, we've got Mueller, and we've got Walton. Those are the wild cards. Some interesting names in there. Impechi Pericard is a player, actually, is very young player. I think he's like 21 years old. He's got a one-handed backhand, and he's been having really good success in the challengers, winning some challengers this year, and getting it done. Such as at the Seguros Tennis Open, which was at the end of April, was one of the challengers he won. So he's been having great success. Hugh Herbert is a familiar name. He's been the top 40 in the world, just coming back. Richard Gasquet, happy for him to have a wild card. A lot of French players, which is the kind of norm for a Grand Slam to get wild cards to players that are from that country and kind of, bring out especially youth from that country. But I will say that I was disappointed to see two names not make the wild cards list. I was disappointed with Dominic Thiem and also with Diego Schwartzman not making the list. For me, those two were names, with Dominic Thiem being a former finalist, two-time finalist, Schwartzman being a former semifinalist, and always a phenomenal player to watch, a very popular player and a top 10 player, especially on the clay, a very strong player on the clay. For him to not get a wild card, and particularly Dominic Thiem, didn't make much sense to me as a two-time finalist, as a player who's had some big results there, beat Djokovic in straight sets at this event, contested great matches against Rafa in the final. To me, those guys were musts, and particularly Dominic Thiem, I don't really understand the logic of not giving him a wild card. Well, also he's a very, very popular player on the tour, and I just don't see how not giving him a wild card would help the event. Nothing against these players, but to me, Dominic Thiem in particular was a must, and I would have been happy to see Schwartzman get a wild card as well in their farewell events, because they both announced retirement the last few weeks. I don't know if you felt the same way, but those are my feelings on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that tournaments are able to give wild cards to non-homegrown players for good reasons. I mean, we saw it last year with the US Open giving Caroline Wozniacki a wild card. There are reciprocal wild cards in this list, and that's just the benefit of being a country that holds a slam. But I do think that tournament organizers should have a lens and a perspective that, one or two of the wild card slots can be used because there's a good story to tell, because fans love a player. And I do think that there is a balance between, giving homegrown talent an opportunity, who your home crowd's going to cheer for, but also players that people love. And I've seen it, myself, having worked at Wimbledon, where some of the homegrown players, like the first round, they're on an outside court, they're difficult to find. They don't necessarily get loads of support. Whereas, somebody like a big name, like a Dominic Thiem, if you put him on an outside court or a kind of outside stadium court, that would get packed, and it would be so much fun because he's a known name. So I think there is a balance to be struck. And when there's good reason, good opportunity for things like that, then I think, tournament organizers should be flexible enough to recognize that opportunity, because at the end of the day, it is about the fans. It is about the fans. That's what makes the sport money. But at the same time, it's the French Open, and they're the last tournament that's going to, bend the rules of, well, I don't know whether them or Wimbledon are going to be the last to cave to Hawkeye and whatnot, but
Sure.
I would say Wimbledon and the French Open together are the two Grand Slams that are probably most traditionalist, most likely to go by the book on, how things have been done for the longest time. So I'm disappointed, but not surprised. And hopefully, it makes it even more sweet if Dominic Thiem is able to qualify and he's into the second round. Fingers crossed he can do it. It would be awesome. But we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. And then going into other withdrawals. So those were the wild cards, and going to withdrawals, we've got Marin Cilic, we've got Diaz Acosta, and we've also got Yuri Lehechka.
Big shame.
Yeah, especially Lehechka, because he's been doing very, very well. Semifinals in Madrid. And Cilic also semifinalist 2 years ago. Diaz Acosta's been having a great season. Lechka's the 1 seed from those pair of names, but all of them are ashamed to go out. And then if you want to go over the WTA ones,
WTA wild cards. Cornet gets a wild card, very deserved. This will be her last Grand Slam. She'll be saying goodbye. She's been on tour for so long, has made a ridiculous number of consecutive Grand Slam appearances. I lose count, somewhere in the 60s. It's absurd. And it will be a lovely goodbye to a French player who's much loved. Ferro, Jacquemus, Mladenovic is the one that I have the biggest question marks over. I haven't seen Mladenovic play a singles match in quite some time. It's like kind of even like a Twitter joke. Like, does she even like play tennis anymore? Confusion. So not sure about that, but we'll see. Paquette, Ponchette. I don't know how to say her name. Sorry, messing it up. And then the reciprocals are Tom Mladenovic and Sasha Vickery. Withdrawals, we've got Mukova, who's last year's finalist, just hasn't been well at all this year, hasn't been able to play, and the injury-ridden career she's had just continues, and it's such a shame. Kvitova is not playing. She's pregnant. Bencic similarly just had her baby. Wickmeyer's out. Graber is out, and Raducanu decided she's not going to play qualifying after not receiving a wild card. She's going to do a training block ahead of Wimbledon. Honestly, I think she wants to play the Olympics with Team GB. And so I don't even know if she's going to get that spot, though. But either way, I don't think she fancies pushing it on the clay. And so called it a day.
Yeah, I mean, the Brits have been doing great this year, especially with Bolter stepping up the way she has. But actually starting from last year when we had like 4 Brits in the semis of that tournament, that was since then I feel like we've had a lot of British players. So I don't know if she's going to like her chances to get into the Olympics, even like you said. But it's a shame to see her retire out. And I thought she was starting to pick up some momentum, starting with that great kind of play at Billie Jean King Cup. It looked like the start of something again, and shame that it's not really seeming to be that. But anyway, it's been worn out, but she's still very young. Even now, she's very, very young. So still giving her a little bit of time. But I'd say a big story also, just to point out for the ATP side in terms of Roland Garros. Djokovic must reach the final in order to reclaim the #1 ranking. If he doesn't reach the final, Jannik Sinner is world #1. It's full stop. It doesn't even matter if Sinner doesn't matter if Sinner plays the tournament. Doesn't matter if he wins the tournament. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what his result is. If Djokovic doesn't reach the final, Jannik Sinner is the new world #1. He's the 29th world #1 in the ATP ranking. So that there's ever been. And Jannik Sinner would be world #1 for the first time. That's what would happen. We'll see. Djokovic defending the title, so it'll be a really interesting tournament. Like I said, it just feels like this is the most wide open tournament on the ATP side, which we've mentioned a few times now, but it really is the most wide open tournament Grand Slam that we'll have that we've had on the men's side in a long time. And I think I mentioned this last week, but even at the Australian Open, when Sinner won the when Sinner won the title going in, everybody was like, oh, Djokovic's a big favorite. I remember even you and I were talking about on the podcast, like Djokovic is the massive favorite. Like he might even have like an over, like he has a really high chance of winning. But Jannik Sinner pulled it out. It feels like going to Roland Garros, everybody has their eyes on Djokovic a little bit, but at this point, it just feels like everybody's looking at Tsitsipas or Ruud or Rublev or, pretty much any name you can name, especially with the way that Madrid and Rome have played out where, you have Jarry, Tabilo, and Tommy Paul in the semifinals of Rome, and those are not the names that everybody expected. So we'll see what happens. A big part of it is if Sinner and Alcaraz play. But that's the thing for the ATP. WTA, really interesting. Hopefully Rybakina is healthy coming in. She can play because she's a big name to watch. But the story is kind of Sabalenka versus Swiatek. Can Sabalenka figure something out? It will still be very exciting. Sabalenka is a top-tier player. And we'll see if Swiatek just can kind of keep it going. But I think it will be exciting for both in very different very different ways, and for Swiatek to try to get her fifth Grand Slam title will be exciting, and also exciting ahead of the Olympics that will be played at Roland Garros as well. So there's a lot coming up.
There is.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess we can kind of finish up there. And yeah, thank you guys for watching the podcast. Like always, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Appreciate everybody tuning in. See you guys at the next one.